Good morning, everyone. Thank you for investing your time with us on this Wednesday morning. My name is Vincent Ling, and I'm the head of Transaction Banking and Payment Solutions of AMTD Group. Today, we have an amazing panel on State of Digital Payments in Asia, Opportunities and Threats. How do we get ahead? Where we will be discussing the big trends that will impact your business directly. Our goal today is that everyone will come away with something, a new idea, a fresh perspective, a new strategy, whatever your role is in this exciting payment industry. Here's a quick rundown of our program for the next 45 minutes. We'll begin by getting our panelists to briefly introduce themselves and share their background in the industry. Then I'll kick off the conversation by asking some introductory questions that explore the latest payment themes, trends, and regulation highly relevant to us all here today. So without further ado, I'd like to start with Pak Billy. Pak Billy, would you please give a quick introduction about yourself and your role in the digital payments and your market dynamics, coupled with how your organization fits into the payment landscape. Thank you, Pak Billy, please.
Hi, thank you, Vincent. Good morning, everyone. I'm Billy Suryajaya. I'm Group Head of Payment and Transaction Group in Bank Sinarmas in Indonesia. Prior to this role, I've been in digital for a while, primarily in digital media, as well as founded my own fintech/agritech. And prior to that, I was in consulting. So just a quick brief overview of the digital payment in the country, in Indonesia. Indonesia is obviously a huge market, 250 million population, and 25% bank population, 25% underbanked, and 50% unbanked population. So within that snapshot, you get a view of how challenging and how huge the opportunity is for digital payment in this landscape. And I'll deep dive further into the country's dynamic and the payment sector as we move along on this discussion. So look forward to this panel discussion, and look forward to sharing views as well as insights with the panel member here. Back to you, Vincent. Thank you.
Thank you, Pak Billy. And next, we will have Mr. Ung, Simoun Ung from Omnipay Inc. Mr. Ung, would you like to give a quick introduction and share about your role in digital payments as well as your market dynamics as well? Thank you, Mr. Ung.
Thanks, Vincent. I'm CEO of Omnipay. We're a non-bank financial institution and electronic money issuer based in the Philippines. We also have offices in Indonesia and Malaysia as well. We're a principal member as issuer and acquirer for UnionPay, JCB, and Discover Global Network. I also represent another company called Bastion Payment Systems, the majority shareholder of Omnipay. Bastion was initially established as a third-party payment processor and has since expanded into cybersecurity and health technology. In terms of payment-related services, Bastion has two principal clients, Omnipay, of course, its own subsidiary, and the Central Bank of the Philippines, where we are providing them the new upgraded next-generation real-time gross settlement system scheduled for delivery next year in July. As a personal aside, I'm also an independent director of Maybank Philippines.
Thank you, Ms. Ung, and we'll come back to you shortly. And we'd like to now move on to Singapore, where Louis is waiting. Louis, would you want to give us a quick introduction about yourself and the role that you play in the payment industry?
Thank you, Vincent. Hi, everyone. This is Louis, founder and CEO of FOMO Pay. FOMO Pay is a Singapore payment company, which is also the first batch recipient of the major payment institution license under the Payment Service Act, which was introduced by MAS earlier this year in 2020. FOMO started from Singapore and now has office in Malaysia. We are providing one-stop digital payment solution to the merchants and financial institutions to help them accept the full suite of all the digital payments, regardless online payment and offline payment. We are happy to be here and share our thoughts on the digital payment and the digital banking progress in Singapore. Thanks.
Thank you, Louis. Last but not least, I'd like to have Chow from Malaysia of Fave. So, Chow, would you please give us a quick introduction about yourself and also the role that you play in the digital payment landscape in?
Yeah, thanks a lot, Vincent. Yeah, hi everyone. I think honored to be here. Yeah, I think for myself, I'm Chen, just call me CC, co-founder of Fave Group. So I think for Fave, we basically in Singapore, Malaysia, and Indonesia. Although our part of our presence are Singapore and Malaysia. In terms of what we do, I think we facilitate payments. We help to connect through digitize for the offline businesses. Currently, we are serving 40,000 offline businesses in Malaysia, Singapore, and Indonesia, and basically end-to-end ensuring that the small and medium enterprise in the offline world can do what the large-scale MNCs or the big chains can do. So, for example, in terms of credit card payments, in terms of e-wallet acceptance, in terms of points acceptance, and digital loyalty, etc. So I think basically end-to-end and serving on that.
Thank you very much, and thanks for the quick introduction of all my panelists. And I'll just start by asking the first question to everybody, and we'll go through the same order as we had just now. I think the question here is very straightforward. During these times over the past maybe 12 months or even 24 months, right? But would you like to please share, because all of you come from different countries and different markets. I think our audience will be very interested to know the state of the digital payment landscape in your current market today. So I think the first question that I have for all the panelists is that how have your government actively promoted the uptake of digital payments in your market that you work in? So maybe Pak Billy, would you like to spend some time sharing with us what is the latest, and how your government has actively promoted payments in Indonesia?
Thank you, Vincent. I think we all agree that since COVID, the world has changed significantly, right? Digital payment, I think cashless obviously is accelerating. Whether you see it from offline to online channels such as QR payment to all the online-only transactions such as e-commerce, right? If you look at all those matrices, it's grown double-digit post-COVID, right? So what has the government been doing on this in Indonesia? I think there's generally a recognition that things have to accelerate. There is a stronger push, for example, for QRIS, QR Indonesia Standard, to be implemented not only just at kind of a modern trade level, but all the way to the kind of smaller merchant, the SMEs and all that. There have been quite a few active engagement. However, having said that, I think I'm probably the only panel that come from banks, right? The rest are from fintechs, right? So I think we all recognize that bank and fintech are regulated slightly differently, where bank has stricter regulation that we have to adhere to. However, there's generally a drive to basically allow for things to be accelerated, for sandbox program to be made more available to the different initiatives that is run in the bank. And I think that's a positive thing in Indonesia, especially given that 50% of the population are unbanked and another 25% are underbanked, right? Those are the huge market that has to have more acceleration. And I think generally that's a macro side. I mean, on micro kind of personal level, I think there's also a shift in terms of how people are doing their payment. I think social is huge, right? These things called social commerce, or purchasing on social media. During COVID, that becomes a lot more prominent. I mean, previously people had been doing that, purchasing on WhatsApp or Instagram ad hoc. But now I think there's a recognition that social interaction as well as payment are hand in hand, right? And there's also views to look into it further. I don't think there's any specific regulation yet, but there are, as the market move in that direction and getting larger, there'll be more and more kind of scrutiny around that, especially with different initiatives by the big tech coming in, like WhatsApp Pay and the likes. So that in a nutshell of the landscape as well as the regulatory point of view. So far, I think COVID has been net positive for the digital payment industry here in Indonesia. And also I think regulatory-wise, the regulator recognized that this is a catalyst for change. So yeah, it's been net positive for us.
Thank you. We'll come back to you later for the next question. So we take a flight to Philippines, where perhaps Mr. Ung can share with us a little bit more about the landscape in Philippines. I think it is a very, very active market, huge market, and something that I would say that I understand a little bit, but I think I'm looking forward to see the latest views from Mr. Ung as well. Mr. Ung, please.
The digital payment landscape, as you mentioned, in the Philippines is very dynamic. Our share of digital payments in terms of total retail payments went from 1% in 2013 to about 10% in 2018, and is continuing to grow about 27 to 30% year on year. Today, about 29% of Filipinos have transactional accounts. In deference to Pak Billy, we share a lot of the same challenges, I think, between Indonesia and the Philippines in terms of our archipelago geography, in terms of having a high unbanked population. And so we share a lot of the same challenges, and that's why part of our coping mechanism, I guess, is to define not just in terms of bank accounts, but in terms of transactional accounts. So this means the people with the prepaid or mobile wallets are also counted as part of the formal financial ecosystem, not necessarily restricted to only those with bank accounts. Interestingly enough, though, about 70% of the unbanked in the Philippines do have mobile phones, although not necessarily smartphones. Pak Billy, I'm sure, is also aware we do have SMS wallets and SMS transfers as well, both in Indonesia and the Philippines. In terms of our regulators' initiatives to push digital payments, we have several ongoing. The central bank has a digital transformation roadmap for 2023, targeting 50% retail payments to be digitized and 70% financially included. Also, ongoing implementation of the national ID in the Philippines should be an enabler for the acceleration of KYC onboarding. I wish we had the same eKTP of Pak Billy in Indonesia that we would have access to as financial institutions, because the onboarding of clients is very, very painful without that national ID. Our central bank also just published the digital banking framework, and it should hit their website probably today or tomorrow. And that's, again, similar to Singapore, where the MAS has already issued digital bank licenses. Our Philippine Central Bank will be looking to do something similar as well. Shortly after the digital banking framework will be published, the Open API framework will also be published. It's still under discussion now and should probably be public towards Q1 next year. Also, as I alluded to earlier, we will have a new real-time gross settlement system to be operated by the central bank by July 2021. So there's a lot of initiatives, not just from the industry, but also from the regulator itself in the Philippines. And it's going to be a fun ride.
Thank you, Simon. We will now switch gears and head back to Singapore, where SFF is at. So, Louis, I know you've been in the industry for a while, and you come in from the fintech perspective. You want to share a little bit about how you see and what is making a challenge or opportunity for you in your business?
I would like to echo to what Simon and Billy just shared. So this COVID has become a catalyst to accelerate the adoption of the digital payment in the developed economy like Singapore, whereas 2 years before, most of the transaction in the retail payment is still heavily carried by cash, according to a study by MAS back in 2017. But in the past 10 months, we have seen a rapid growth and adoption of the digital payment, especially the Pay Now, which is riding on the fast kind of national instant payment frameworks, has seen a rapid growth of more than 5 times, according to the studies and the newspapers which was published. So what happened in the past 10 months or 1 year during the COVID, we see I would like to highlight 3 parts, which is quite kind of catching the attention in the fintech and the digital payment market in Singapore. Number 1 is regulation licensing, which MAS was introducing the new Payment Service Act, which took place in January 2020. It covers it's a risk-based, activity-based new licensing scheme, which embraces the new activities in the industry, let's say for the digital payment tokens, like the e-money issuing, the account issuance. A lot of this kind of new activities were not covered in the previous licensing scheme, but under this new Payment Service Act, the MAS is having a new licensing schemes to cover the new activities, which could lay out the level play and welcome the active players from worldwide to come to Singapore and to promote the fintech innovations. And FOMO is also the first batch of the recipient for the new Payment Service Act, major payment institution license. Number 2, we see a lot of government grant in Singapore to help SME, especially to adopt this kind of new digital payment. For example, the Pay Now, government is giving SME a $300 to $600 one-time grant if your business start to accept the Pay Now QR or Pay Now transactions from your client, so that they don't have to pay you cash, they can just pay you online or via the mobile phone during the COVID for hygiene purpose. Number 3, what we see is the interoperability technical standard, which government is driving the initiatives. In Singapore, with 5.8 million populations, there are already more than 20 e-wallets operating here, and it's a very fragmented digital payment market here. But MAS say no, I don't. Even all the e-wallets, they are competitors themselves. They are competing for the users' attentions and usage. But for the merchant, it will be too confusing if everybody run their own technical standard. That's why back in 2018, MAS is the first nation in the world to set up the national QR standard called SGQR, and it was officially launched back in 2019. And now, if you come to Singapore, you will find this wide kind of deployment and acceptance of this SGQR, ranging from the small hawker centers on the street to the big hotels and different kind of retail shops, so that the merchant can just adopt one SGQR, and consumers could use different kind of e-wallets to scan and make payment. It looks much neat and much easy to recognize, and a much clear message to the consumers in the market. So during the COVID, we see a rapid growth and adoption of this SGQR, and we believe it will become a new symbol for all of you when you travel to Singapore next time. You will definitely see this, and you will see it's really a kind of live examples about the fintech progress in Singapore market itself. So from these 3 parts, licensing schemes, the interoperability industry standard, and also the grant are the key parts we want to share, that how Singapore highlight its growth of fintech in the past 1 year.
Thank you, Louis. And last but not least, I think we'd like to hear from Cici. Cici mentioned from Fave Group, and we'd like to hear her experience. He works and lives in Malaysia, and now he's giving us a flavor of our conversation.
Thanks a lot. I think it's been great to hearing from all of y'all. I think hearing from all our ASEAN peers on how the development. I think as an overall trend of digital payment, I think COVID has been an enabler across the whole region and including Malaysia as well. I think for the periods that as people are getting more scared of touching the physical hard cash, I think people are now shifting towards digital, where I think in terms of ATM transactions as well, withdrawal money from ATM has significantly reduced. I myself have only gone for ATM once since COVID started, right? So I think that today people, the places where people put in no cash only is significantly reduced already, and I think that's one of the big push. And I think from the government perspective, few aspects they do. So I think one is the do it now. So I think Singapore, this one Louis talked about the SQR. In Malaysia, we are building on that do it now. So do it now currently at this point participated by all the banks, and I think starting from this month onwards, over the next few months, most of the fintech or the e-wallets will be coming on board. So whether Fave Pay, Touch and Go, Grab Pay, Shopee Pay, all will be coming on board that framework. So I think it will be a pretty interesting. So what it means is that if you see let's say example a Fave Pay QR, you can now open up whether a CIMB Bank app or Touch and Go app or Grab app, and you'll be able to scan that QR and go through, right? So I think that will basically enable across, and I think that will enable also. I think slightly different between what Malaysia government does and Singapore government does is that in Singapore government, every shop has only one QR, but every merchant acquirer needs to basically sign on. Whereas in Malaysia, the shop can actually have multiple QR, but each QR need to be interoperable. So that will be where it's currently moving. And I think in terms of incentive from government as well, the government has put in quite a bit of incentives. So let's say example in August and September, the government basically subsidized going to all the fintech e-commerce players as well, and basically subsidize all the promotions dollar to dollar. So for example, if they put in a 5% cashback, the government will actually subsidize another 5%. So basically that enables all the fintech players across to drive, and that was the industry-wide, and the government had just approved another $75 million budget for 2021 for this purpose. So I think that will be one of the way to build it across.
From what I'm reading, and I'm also hearing a little bit about the cash and the way that digital payment has been adopting in Singapore, I'd like to just share with all of us some stats during the COVID time. I think there has been reports of cash, a decrease of usage of cash more than doubled in the first quarter of this year, first 2 quarters of this year. And at the same time, the use of electronic payment has spiked by more than 50% during this particular period. So in that sense, I would say that COVID has indeed given a significant catalyst and push in the market, in the digital payment, in the adoption of digital payment. So I'd like to just ask particularly to Billy, just now when in your conversation with us, you didn't quite touch on a little bit on the impact of COVID. Would you want to just talk through in terms of COVID, and as a result of what has happened, and what's the difference it has made in the adoption of digital payment in Indonesia?
So I mean, perhaps it's more relevant to answer the question in terms of anecdote, right? How has COVID changed our behaviors, right? I mean, for people like me who kind of consume Starbucks on a daily basis, for example, now when I go to Starbucks, they no longer accept cash, right? I'll have to pay using cashless and using QR. So that's just one small anecdote. But if you look into, say, the SME level, the merchants on the ground, even if you now go to some of the wet markets, which are harder to touch in terms of digital payment, right? You start seeing people taking QR payment these days, right? That's what COVID has done, and you can feel it because this probably the hardest market segment to touch in terms of digital, right? It's so hard to change people's behavior when they are surviving on $2-3 a day, right? So from that perspective, I think those anecdotes kind of give real life example on how COVID has become catalyst for digital payment. We do hope to ride the wave, so-called, and make sure that we push more digital products from banking perspective, or bring people to go cashless and to use various apps available on their mobile. I mean, Indonesia, if you count the number of SIM cards that's out there in Indonesia, it's more than the number of population here. But if you look at the number of smartphones in the market, I mean, depending on which data you believe, it's anything from 50 to 60% or even 70%, right? Depending on which data you look at. So, and coming back to the unbanked population, at least half of the country is unbanked and another quarter is underbanked. It just makes sense for digital payment or digital financial services to be pushed to the unbanked or underbanked population using smartphones. And those anecdotes, I think, give us a view in terms of the momentum that gets generated by COVID, and what we can do about it.
Thank you. And my personal anecdote that I'd like to share with everyone and our audience today is that probably 5-6 years ago, when I visit certain merchants and certain places, I only see cash-only merchants. I'm sure some of you can appreciate that, where they don't take cards, it's cash-only. But today, one of my favorite restaurants that I go to and have my meals is 100% digital payments only, no cash. So they actually put it on their menu to say that please pay by credit cards or digital payment only. We do not accept cash because this is a cashless restaurant. So in that sense, that has changed significantly. I think more merchants are more open to actually accepting digital payments. I think this is the trend that we are seeing today. So speaking of digital payments and speaking of QR codes, I think every one of you has spoke about QR code in your own market, and we all know that everybody in every single market and all the regulators is coming out with your own QR specifications. And I think Louis has alluded to SGQR, and I think Pak Billy has also alluded to QRIS in Indonesia. I think all this country-specific QR is being rolled out during this time. So my question to my panelists here today is that what impacts has it been on implementation of QR on your business model, and what are the challenges that you face during the implementation in terms of some of this? I know there are different speeds of implementation in each one market, but maybe you'd just like to share a little bit about what you think, or even some of the challenges you may face. So, well, let me just reverse your order a little bit. Maybe we have Simon, sharing your thoughts about some of the latest development in QR. I know that PPMI is actively looking at some deployment and stuff like that. So, Simon, please.
Thanks, Vincent. Yeah, you're right. We are launching we have launched PHQR here in the Philippines. Part of our challenge is we started with the P2P. It has very limited uptake right now in terms of the number of financial institutions that are actually participating on it. Part of it fundamentally is because the switch that it runs on is BankNet today, and they're in process of migrating the rails from version 1, which is homegrown, to version 2, which is VocaLink. And so that's pushed some of the financial institutions like ourselves to wait for the actual migration before turning it on. Otherwise, we would have to integrate twice. So today, I think in terms of the Philippines, we're live for P2P. P2M was delayed. It was supposed to go live December this year, but because of COVID, it's probably going to be Q2 next year. I think part of the ongoing challenge we have as an industry in the Philippines is the, argument whether to take the Singapore model of having a single standard or the Malaysian model of having interoperability. Personally, I think the interoperability makes more sense because there's no reason to force Alibaba and Alipay into a EMV code QR standard when they have the most QR pay implementations. But at any rate, our regulators have deemed that we'll be following the Singapore model, so we'll have a single standard going forward. So I think our customer experience will look a lot more like Singapore to Malaysia in the next couple of months. But I would expect the uptake by the industry to have a big pickup around Q2 next year, once the back end of the industry in terms of the switch at BankNet has fully migrated, and then we can all go to this new model.
Thank you. And CC?
Yeah, so I think that for Malaysia, I think what Mr. Ung mentioned as well. I think where we are is that the Do It Now, which is owned by PayNet, which is owned by Central Bank and the banks. Basically, they started the P2P part as well as the Do It Now for the banks from last year, right? So I think that was the first phase going out where people can now go through. But I think the traction hasn't gone as much on the B2M side, because for the banks, most of them doesn't have a strong merchant acquiring at the merchant aspects. So I think as we speak, I think this month where a few of the fintech and e-wallets are going on that rails, I think it'll be interesting to see how the traction will be and whether eventually it will be going towards everyone just going on every shop only take one merchant acquirer, or each shop will be willing to take a few, right? Because technically every QR will be able to scan across by anyone. So I think, and the government is actually going to subsidize the rate to 0 as well for this, and at the end of 2022. So I think for the next 2 years, basically will be open pricing. So I think I think pricing would not be an issue right now for the merchants. But right now, I think the question will be, what will be the direction? I think we'll be waiting to be seen for that. But I think in terms of, even though there's multiple QR at each shops, the standard is the same, because it's still Do It Now QR. It's just that the shop may have multiple different QR that going on the same standards. So I think that's sort of where we are. So we're sort of at an inflection point where to see, I think the next few months, to see whether this will basically fully take off, or people will still go by where they'll still be crowded of all the QRs.
Thank you, Chen Chow. Maybe we'd like to switch over to Louis. Maybe a quick update in terms of what do you see?
I think all the panelists here is a good mix to demonstrate the national QR standard for different regional countries in ASEAN. And apart from here, we will also see there's a PromptPay QR from Thailand as well. And there's also upcoming the Vietnam QR coming to the market, right? But the common base is everybody is EMV based standard, right? It's only, there are some 20% around there, the customization based on different countries, their own regulation customization. That's why the EMV standard, which is shared as a base by all the countries, can gives the fundamental reason for the interoperability. That's why after each country rule out their own national QR, the next step, which very naturally to think, will be the interoperability between the countries. Actually, we have seen quite a few bilateral or even tripartite this kind of interoperability in the region. For example, between Singapore and Thailand, there are already a successful launch between the Singapore SGQR and PromptPay QR by the ITMX in Thailand, which means the Thai tourists, they are able to come down to Singapore and use their bank apps to scan the SGQR and make the payment, just like the same user experience like what they do back in Thailand. Vice versa, Singaporean can go down to Thailand and scan the PromptPay QR and make the payment, and the processing will be done by the NETs in Singapore, or the ITMX in Thailand, who are managing, who are the main processors for the national QR. We also see there are news between the Cambodia and also Thailand for this kind of cross-border interoperability. Actually, I just want to share, FOMO also enable the interoperability between the Singapore and also Malaysia. Right now, there are some experiments in the market. Between the Do It Now QR and also the SGQR. So we do see a lot of this kind of new initiatives coming into the market, whereas the different payment players from different markets are working together, the governments are working together. So the ultimate objective, hopefully, maybe sometime in the near future, we will see ASEAN QR, that everybody in this region, right, we are able to travel seamlessly and spend, smoothly in any countries. Just take out your favorite bank apps or mobile payments apps and scan the QR, regardless in Singapore, Malaysia, Philippines, or Indonesia, and just scan, and that's it. Hope that day can come soon, right?
Right, Louis. I think today is the beginning of that particular conversation, and this conversation hopefully will spur on more interaction and more compatibility and interaction where we will have interoperability being done at a much speedier pace. Right. Thank you. And Pak Billy, we would like to hear from you in terms of I think QRIS is a big thing, and
Yep.
personally read through and understood a little bit about QRIS as well. So perhaps you'd like to share your perspective in terms of QRIS, given that you are right in the thick of action as well.
Thank you, Vincent. I mean, three things on QRIS, right? The positive, the challenges, as well as the trend, right? I think the positive is it's easier to get incentives for users. I think if you talk about QRIS, right, there are so many fintechs burning their marketing spend on QR payment, right? Previously in Indonesia, it was started by OVO, one of the key players that initiate this in segment. And then today you get players like Shopee Pay, which is doing a lot of promotion. So for users, it's great, right? It's a really efficient way of getting incentives and therefore drive adoption on euro payment. The challenges itself on QRIS adoption, I think is the objective versus implementation. I mean, the objective is that each merchant should have just one QR code, right? And therefore you can use any platform to pay. But because of the way it is structured, as well as I think from adoption's perspective, merchant wants to maximize incentives and all that, you get a merchant still displaying 5 QR IS code, whereas one is enough, right? So I think the behavior part, that will need a bit of time and as well as alignment of incentives for the merchant. To make it a lot more streamlined and a lot cleaner. Trend-wise, I do agree with the panel. I think going forward, the cross-border compatibility is the trend going forward. I mean, we've seen some of the international giants try to basically embed their QR so that it's aligned with the local QR, so that any foreign tourists coming into the country is able to use their own payment system in Indonesia. So I think that's the trend going forward. I think this market is still at its very early stage, and the adoption will definitely accelerate going forward if things don't dramatically change.
Thank you. So let's move on and to our last question. I would say that 2020 is arguably one of the year that most of us would like to forget. Some of us have done a lot of stuff. A lot of us are actually working from home a bit of time. So looking forward to 2021, just give us a quick idea in terms of what exciting plans you have lined up for 2021 moving forward. Maybe we'll start with Simon. You'd like to share with us a little bit about your 2021 plans?
Yeah, we're continuing our plans to expand, go throughout the region. BI actually in Indonesia, in Pak Billy's backyard, they just approved our acquisition of a remittance company. And that was a faster channel for us rather than applying for new, was to just acquire a remittance company. We're also looking to do that in different countries around the world. partly because, like Indonesia, the Philippines has a lot of migrant workers. And to be more relevant, I guess, our plan will be to expand beyond our borders and go where our countrymen are and be able to provide the same payment services that they can expect from home in their host countries, even when they're working abroad. And we're looking to do that partly by acquisition, partly by partnering, depending on the regulation framework of the host country.
All right, so it sounds like regional expansion. Thank you. What about Pak Billy? Let me a quick 1 minute overview of your exciting plans for 2021.
Yeah, product-wise, I think digital banking platform is very obvious. I mean, coming from bank, I think the framework and the license is pretty clear already in Singapore, and I think soon Indonesia and other countries in ASEAN will follow, and it is an undeniable trend. So we are keeping our very sharp eyes focus on that. And then second is on channels. I think we treat all the fintech and the different channels available as partners. As a bank, we obviously have a host of conventional banking products and whatnot. And it's about basically working with our channel partners to make sure that we can disseminate all these products to the people who need them.
Let's hear from CC. Chen Chow, what's your top one thing that you have planned for 2021?
Yeah, so I think like for the past few months, I think what we will continue to build upon is I think enable more Fave loyalty program into multiple more platforms. So I think we did that with Singtel, Dash, with DPS Payla. I think that will continue to build on and enable more payment method e-wallets into Fave. So example, GrabPay into Fave, and then we'll partner into the RPP Do It Now for the national QR. So I think there will be a few things that we're building on, and they'll be basically continuing on this direction.
Thank you. So we have just only a couple of minutes left. Maybe Louis, you want to just share with us your thoughts for 2021?
So FOMO is recently acquired by AMTD Digital back in July 2020, right? We are part of a bigger financial conglomerate. So what we see is now, due to the COVID, if a company just provide a single product, like what we are doing, we have been providing the one-stop payment solution to the merchant. It's not enough to meet the merchant's needs. Nowadays, the merchant want to have a bundled package solutions from the service providers, including payment, but they're also looking for the financing, for the insurance, for the marketing solutions. Whereas they want to get at one stop, it's rather the SME from their service providers. That's the trend going forward. So FOMO, our plan is to provide one-stop bundle solutions to cater to the merchant's needs, starting from payment. But now, after we join the AMTD, we hope we are able to bundle the different kind of group capabilities and to become a one-stop trusted partner for our merchants, especially SMEs in Singapore. And we do see the digital banking is a new trend, and hopefully when MAS is issuing this license by the end of the year in Singapore, we are going to see a much more interesting landscape in Singapore in 2021. That's our plan, Vincent.
Thank you very much. And I think time is running up for all our session today. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank all the panelists that shared your interesting perspective and all your inputs. I'm sure they will be very valuable to our audience. So thank you very, very much for all your time. And I think we should conclude here. I look forward to meeting you individually in person soon. And thank you and best of luck. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.